What little girl hasn't envisioned being a princess, a superhero, or even a mermaid? Make-believe play with 18-inch dolls dressed in costumes is a great way to foster a child's imagination. Here to share her latest patterns and ideas for costumes is Joan Hinds. Welcome back to Sewing with Nancy.
Well, hi Nancy, thank you for having me back. I've noticed lately that more and more people are sewing for dolls. Fanciful costumes are easily made with small pieces of fabric and trim that yield creative results. The Lilac Fairy is our first doll dress-up idea. A combination of netting, stretchy knit, and a little time will result in a costume made to spark imagination.
Doll costume dress-up, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Studios, fine sewing furniture custom built in America. Clover, making a difference in sewing, quilting, crafting, and needle arts for over 30 years. Amazing designs and Class A needles.
Most of the sewing that we're doing in this two-part series has to do with a straight stitch and a zigzag. And even with these specialty fabrics that you've used on this costume, Joan, show our viewers that it's pretty simple to put together.
Yes, yes. The first one we have is the Lilac Fairy, and this costume is in 3 parts. There's a leotard, and you can see this here. It just has elastic for straps. And then she has a skirt, which is many sections of netting, and that is gathered together onto a fabric band. And then I'll show you in the back here that she has wings. And those are made from netting, and there's wire stitched around the edge, so it gives them some shape.
We're going to start with a leotard. It's made with stretch, lycra, spandex fabric, two-way stretch knit fabric. You don't need a lot of knit fabric.
No, you sure don't. The first thing you would do then is to cut out the pattern pieces, and you need 1 front, and then you would need 2 of these backs.
And the back is sewn first, and we've used contrasting thread, obviously, but you've just used a zigzag, narrow zigzag stitch so that, because it stretches.
Yes, it's a lot easier to do it that way.
And that back seam is stitched to the dot on the pattern, and then you just turned onto the edges.
Right, right. So that is the back. And then the front is where you start pinning this fold-over elastic. And here's a piece of this elastic, and it has a little groove in the middle that makes it very easy to fold. And you would simply cut a piece to put at the top, and I like to go over the edge just a little bit, and that way I'll make sure I catch it in the edge. And then I put my pin in here to hold it down, and then I would keep going. Looks like I have to adjust that. But you would keep pinning it all the way across.
And here's a close-up of how easy that is to stitch to the top. Just keep that zigzag stitch, and you have the top finished.
Right, so here's the top, and then the back would also need that stitched.
Now another length of that fold-over elastic is cut, and it serves as the finish for the armhole as well as the straps.
Right, right, that's the next step.
So you sew the two together, and it just is connected. And then the finishing part.
Right, the legs then need to be finished, and they need to have some elastic to hold it on the doll. And we've got a piece here where it's been started. There's just a small little section of about 2.5 inches that goes across the leg area.
And you zigzag it down. Let's see, here we have it zigzag down. There we go. And then and you don't have to have perfect sewing.
No,
these
no,
are doll
not
clothes.
at all.
And then you turn to the elastic to the inside and zigzag again.
Right, and that edge is covered up.
The lower edge is stitched, and you're done.
You're done. Yep, the leotard's finished, and you can decorate it any way you want.
We've done a lot of closures with hook and loop tape or big snaps, so it makes it easy for the little girl to undo. And the skirt is in many parts of netting, and you did a great job of sourcing out fabric for the skirt.
Right. This netting is 6-inch rolls that you can find in the party section of craft stores. And so the width is already cut for you. And I just simply cut 18-inch lengths.
Okay.
And then I folded them into 3 pieces.
And here I'll do this. It's kind of lightweight, but 1, 2, 3, get them pretty even.
Right. And it doesn't matter. They're flower petals, so they don't have to be perfect.
Sure. And you get 12 of these.
12 of those.
And then you're going to take each section and you're going to zigzag along the top to gather over a cord. And let me show you the result. Here's the result, and here's the process. At the sewing machine, I've taken 1 stitch into the fabric and then pulled up the needle thread. You can see that that bobbin thread loops up. Well, then grasp the bobbin thread and pull it, about 1 yard long. Set your machine at a zigzag, and when you lower the presser foot and you zigzag over that bobbin thread, you have stitched them together as well as provided the bobbin thread gathering. Now here is my sample, our sample I should say, that we've started to this is the bobbin thread right here. Just pull that. We're going to be doing this a lot during this series. You have lots of gathers.
Lots of gathers. Doll clothes usually does.
So you gather this, and it's to fit the length of the waistband.
Right, and this is just fabric. I chose an iridescent to put on top. You wouldn't have to do that. So you would cut those 2 sections, and it's folded in half, and I just serged the edge to hold them together, and then I stitched along a casing line so that you could put your elastic in.
And we're going to expedite this a little bit, but you'd measure the center of the waistband, the center of the skirt, and you'd pin the center marks so that you would get it right, and you just stitch these 2 together.
Right, right. And then the last thing that you would do before you do the seam is to insert elastic.
And you have a bodkin there. We're just going to reference that because we have these little pieces.
Right, and you would just insert it in here, and I've got it marked before cutting so that it wouldn't pull all the way through.
So you insert it, and we like to cut after we insert it.
Yes.
Then you've taken off the skirt so you can show our viewers how it's finished at the end, because it'll be flat.
Right, and here is the skirt, and that is the back seam. And all you would do is stitch in through the whole thing. So you're stitching through the waistband as well as the netting.
So the elastic was put in flat, the gather's flat. Oh, fun.
Yes.
Fun. The wings. The wings are next. I'll let you have those.
I'll take that back. And
we're going to use a heavier netting. Joan chose 2 layers of netting and the pattern and traced it onto the fabric.
Right, you have to do one side and then you flip the pattern piece over and you do the second side. And
my wings are flying away. There we go. And then to make them stiff, we have wire. Now your gauge of wire is...
It's a 30 gauge wire. It's a fabric covered wire. It doesn't matter the size necessarily, but...
And here's a close-up of how you would zigzag over that wire and do it pretty tightly. Even though our samples have been done in dark thread, you would do it in white thread or matching, and then just cut without cutting the stitches around the edge. That wire is, or that netting is not going to ravel.
No, no.
And you can tack it to the leotard and you have a fairy outfit. You could also make the same pattern pieces with pink, and it could be a ballerina or lavender or green. So there are many options for dressing up dolls. Well, Joan, this is fancy.
Yes, this is Cinderella's ball gown, and it is a very satiny, shiny dress, very poofy, and but it follows just basic doll dress construction. You have the top part, the bodice with the sleeves, and that's constructed first, and then you would make the skirt and gather it up, and it's stitched, and then it's open in the back, which I'll show you, and then the dress covers up a hoop skirt.
Why, every princess needs a hoop skirt.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So we're going to show you the pattern pieces that have been cut out, the front and the back. And the first step is to sew the shoulder seams. And you've lined them as well.
Right, right. So you've got the front and 2 backs, and I've got shoulder seams stitched here, also with the lining. And the next step is to stitch around the neckline here, which you can see, And then we have wrapped corners. This is turned down, and then the back seam is stitched.
So after you stitch that neckline, then you wrap the corner along the stitching line and stitch down, and that will give on these little pieces. You'll be able to turn that corner sharp on a dime. I don't know if that's, a dime isn't sharp, but I think you'll get the idea of...
And when you just poke it a little bit, you have a nice tight corner there.
Sure. And this next sample shows that the whole neckline and center back has been turned right side out. And you'll find there a lot of the techniques that we show during this two-part series are used over and over again, and one of them being casings for the elastic.
Right, right. And we have that on the bottom of these sleeves, and you need to press the edge to the inside, and then
Twice.
you press again. Right.
And then stitch a casing. The elastic was inserted through this area, and you have the tack down, and then the cap.
Right, the cap is stitched with the gathering technique that we showed in the first segment.
So zigzagging over that bobbin thread. There are many gathering techniques, but this one gives you a narrow, can be stitched within that narrow seam allowance. And then, they're small pieces, but then we'd go down to this bodice, meet right sides together, and sew the sleeve to the armhole. Now, I'm just going to kind of place this here. Make believe that's sewn, because the next sample is sewn. We have lots of samples of doll clothes. But on this one, you can see that that little sleeve has been put onto the shoulder seam of right sides together. Now, this sample has many steps in it. So let's look then at the underarm seam. That's next. You stitch the underarm seam of the bodice and the sleeve in one fell swoop. You just use narrow seam allowances?
Yes, usually 1/4 inch for everything.
And then when we turn this right side out, you have a puffy sleeve. And you'd put in the other one, and then your bodice would be the top. Old term, I guess, is bodice, but the top would be done.
It's complete, and you can decorate it in any way that you would like to do.
Let's take a look at the skirt. And if you show our audience the skirt and how it meets in the center.
Right. I cut these pieces a little bit off so that it will meet just to her left or to her right side here. And when you gather it up, you would place it on the bodice just a little bit off center.
And the skirts are curved in the front. You'll find a pattern piece curved in the front. And Joan, you serged the edge.
Right. Serged the edge and turned it all to the inside and pressed it. And then I put on the trim.
And then you did that gathering again.
Right.
Same.
More gathers.
So the gathers are then, we're not sewing that back seam at all at this point. So on this sample, I've already started to pin one skirt. So I would then pin, with right sides together, another skirt. And you'll follow the pattern and overlap it as much as you need to. So you're working flat, which is great. You're not having to work in narrow little, except for the sleeve maybe, but now the skirt is pinned, and I'm going to roughly pin this on, and you'd stitch it down. It takes a little time to do some manipulation of your fabric, but you'd sew it all flat. So we'll do virtual sewing, make believe that's been stitched, and then you can kind of see how this is coming together. Now there's an underlay, and I'm just going to place this under here. It's a cute little underskirt and would be gathered. And then, did you just place this under here?
Right, right. It would go underneath it, and you would center it.
You can kind of see how, we have another sample to show. That might be a little clearer.
Right. This is the bride outfit, and it's made out of an eyelet fabric instead of a shiny satin.
So here's this underlay have been placed in here, and let's take a look. You can see the beauty shot of that bridal dress, and here it is on the doll all dressed up, and you can see how it's the same component pieces as the one we have on our Cinderella dress.
Right, just change the fabrics and a little trims, and you're all set.
What I like about your ideas is that you're learning many sewing techniques, and this boning skirt, this is just a big circle with elastic at the top, but to keep that, look at this, to keep the skirt bowing out, you've used boning.
Right, it's actual boning you can buy in the notions section of a fabric store.
And you have it marked on the skirt after it's been a circle. You align the boning to the mark, and here's a close-up. I'm just stitching it down along each side of the boning. When you put the skirt underneath the princess or the bridal dress, you have a perfect silhouette. Your little girl's doll will look swimmingly in Joan's mermaid costume. Sequin fabric, glittery and pom-pom trims, plus clever patterns make short work of this imaginative costume. I have to mention that this is my favorite.
Yes,
this is
indeed.
really adorable, and why don't you show our viewers a close-up?
It was a lot of fun to make. It comes in two parts. You can see that her tail, or her body here, is simply a skirt with the tail attached. And inside the tail, I put in a little polyester stuffing to make it stand out. And the top is an iridescent fabric over a cotton, which I like to use since it's so shiny, and it matches the skirt. And it's just a strapless top with a lot of decorative trims.
Now the design is, as you mentioned, has the sequin fabric. I haven't worked with that much sequin fabric in my life, so this is a good time to learn some of those techniques.
Right, you can try it out on a small little project. So the first thing you need to do is to get your pattern out and cut out 2 skirts and 2 lining fabrics.
Okay.
And I can show you here the lining, and we've stitched around the edge, and there's an opening. There's dots marked on the pattern piece, so you have a place that you need to stop.
Sure. So that's where the legs go through.
Right, right. And on this one is the outside of the skirt, and you can see that it's been turned to the right side, and the tail has been poked out a little bit. And now you need to insert the lining. And this takes a little bit because you'll have to start in this manner, and then you'll have to pull the tail and get it so that it fits inside here.
So that probably takes the most time.
Yes, it does. And you can see here that
Magic.
It's all finished.
Yeah,
yes, it is. And for the bottom opening here, just turn the edge under and then top stitch it.
So about a generous 1/4 of an inch has been stitched at the top.
And I just zigzag those together, and then you're going to make a casing by turning the edge to the inside, and then you will stitch it, leaving an opening to put in elastic.
These are small patterns, so you're going to be using the small seam allowances. So this is just a generous 1/4 of an inch has been turned under. And then we like to cut the elastic longer than you need so it doesn't spring away.
Right, you
and
won't
then
lose
cut it after you have gathered the top to the right side. So there you go, that's about it.
That's it, the skirt is finished.
The top is, as Joan mentioned, iridescent fabric. This little pattern piece was placed on the fold, was stitched to a cotton fabric, just basted along, hence the black line, and then to another piece of cotton fabric for the lining. And then short stitches to stitch around the curves of this top, and you'd sew the side seams. We used the little wrap corner technique of folding under that edge and stitching so you can get a nice turn. But before you do the turning, I'd like you to do some trimming, and you can see I've already started to do this. And that would be using a pinking shears or a rotary cutter that has a pinking blade. On these narrow seam allowances, it makes fast work of grading the seams so that when you invert the fabric over itself, it doesn't have a lot of bulk. You do some pressing, and then you get that nicely smoothed out. And it takes, as Joan mentioned, takes a little time to get some of these edges smoothed out. The peplum portion is right here, and Joan, you've added that same iridescent fabric.
Serged the edge and then turned it under and top stitched it.
Added some piping, no, not piping, pom-poms, excuse me, and gather. There's 2 of these that are, I'll show you our quick sample, have been sewn to the lower edge of this top, and then hook and loop tape would be sewn to fit over the great skirt. When family or friends suffer from Alzheimer's disease, our instinct is to help, but often we don't know how. Today's Nancy's Corner guest found a solution that not only helps the patient, but also the caregiver. Please welcome Marcia Inquist, the designer of Alzheimer's fidget mats, who joins us via Skype from Austin, Texas. Thanks for joining me, Marcia.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Nancy. I appreciate the opportunity to share our aids with others.
This is a great project for anyone who has some scraps of fabric or bits and pieces of trim, and tell our viewers how you began or why you began sewing the fidget mats.
Well, like you said, I was visiting my mother-in-law at the rest home. I would see persons with dementia that were very agitated, and it seemed so sad, but I really didn't know how to help. So I did a little research and came up with some ideas. I love to sew. I love to sew for a purpose with others. So that's how I began.
And let's show our viewers, you sent me 3 fidget mats, and they're a little bigger than a placemat, and they have all sorts of ins and outs, zippers and buttons. I love the textural things that you've added.
Right, and the textural, these soft things like the little toy in the soft pocket, these, by stroking these, by fidgeting with these, it tends to calm agitation and it decreases wandering and just makes for happier people.
Sure, and you even have, we're going to have a little noise here, you even have some squeaky toys in here, and what fun. You must have quite a collection of things in your sewing area.
I do, and a lot of people are very happy to share bits of lace and soft fabrics and buttons and all these things with us. So anybody can join in this project.
What interesting thing that when we had our conversation earlier is that you said it also helps the caregiver.
It does. Essentially, the purpose is to improve the quality of life, L-I-F-E. So when I bring these to a rest home, it just lifts everybody's spirits. You see the smiles all around, and the staff get involved. They involve the patients. Boredom is a big problem.
Yes.
And if they're not using their minds, if they're not using their senses, these will atrophy, they will stiffen. So this gives them lots of opportunity to use their hands, use their senses. And F is for focus. These are also used with children with special needs in some classrooms here in Austin. And they can focus on the zipper. And since it's bright and colorful, they enjoy doing this kind of fine motor therapy, or buttoning and unbuttoning the buttons. E is for the exercises, and exercising their minds, their hands, their fingers. So this is from the care, we've had wonderful help from a number of facilities here in Austin that are using these and testing them out. And they particularly like the agitation relief when they have, or for focus during therapy. And visitors, when you walk into the room around in a rest home, it's often, I want to talk to somebody, but I don't know how. Okay, here's the focus.
Oh, it's so wonderful. And your goal is for people to make them in their community. You have a pattern available, some guidelines, and then give them away to a local unit, a school, wherever they would need something, where activity and they need more life, your L-I-F-E, those to involve them, to prevent them from fidgeting from young and old alike.
Right. And so we have instructions. They're on we have a blog spot, ALZ Activity Aids blogspot.com, and that'll be on your site.
Yes, it will.
And we appreciate that. The patterns are flexible, and can be made at a very low cost.
Well, I thank you for sharing this. So, this is a great project, great to sew, great to give away, and come back again sometime.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
You're
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank you to our viewers for watching during this series on doll clothes. Joan Hinds will be back next time with the second part of this series. As Marcia mentioned, you can go to nancyzieman.com, find out more information on Nancy's Corner. Join us and while watching more TV shows by social media. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.
Joan Hinds has written a book entitled Doll Costume Dress Up that is the reference for this two-part series. The book includes a CD with 20 printable patterns for doll costumes. It's $18.99 plus shipping and handling. To order the book, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2811. Order item number U7871, Doll Costume Dress Up. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at nancyzieman.com to see additional episodes, Nancy's blog, and more. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, has been brought to you by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Studios, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Class A Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Pellon. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.